Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is Reservations, and I'm Jeremy Blair.
And I'm Rain Wayland. So we would have gotten started a little sooner, dude, but Ashley and I were finishing up an episode of The Umbrella Academy.
Oh, yeah, I heard the fourth season is bad.
Yeah, I'm hoping maybe it's just...
I mean, I don't want to start the show with negativity. It's not what I'm here to do, but that's...
No. Well, and that's kind of why we were like, let's rewatch the show. So if it does really fall off, as people say it has, then, at least we'll have the good to go into the bad. And also, we hadn't seen season 3 anyway.
Oh, okay.
So
I don't think
we were like, we might as well just go ahead and just rewatch it.
Yeah, I would need to start completely over. It's been years since I've seen it, so.
Yeah, I am curious though, because Ashley did mention to me that she read that Gerard Way and Gabriel, the co-creator with Gerard of the Umbrella Academy comic, I guess were more heavily involved in the final season. So I'm like, man, what if that's what made it suck? That they're like, no. Like, no, they wouldn't do that. No, we need to do it like this. And the writers are like, okay, I guess. Like, it's not like we've been writing your characters for, 3 seasons already, but all right.
Yeah, I haven't thought about the show once in a few years until they started promoting season 4, and I was like, oh, right. They haven't finished that.
Yeah. Yeah, I did kind of forget about it, and then, when the announcement of, like, the 4th season would be the final season, I was like, oh, yeah.
Right.
We didn't even see season 3. I forgot how good it was, man. Like, truly. Season 2, I think, is so good, man. Like, although every time they keep bringing up Kennedy's assassination, and showing Dealey Plaza, I've been like leaning over to Ash and like, I've been there.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, you haven't mentioned it once.
Yeah. Coolest bachelor party ever.
Dude.
Has there been a museum at a bachelor party?
Dude, I've told everyone that story. I'm like, he literally said it as a joke. And then next thing I know, we're like, all right, we're going to the Dealey Plaza. And we're like, wait, we're actually doing that?
It was fun.
It was fun. And of course, that became my whole personality for like 3 weeks after we got back. I remember like texting Keegan and be like, oh, no, this makes more sense. And Keegan's like, Keegan, nicest guy in the world. Shout out to Keegan. If he's listening.
I doubt it.
But I'm sure he was like, Rain, I don't care. We had fun. I don't care.
This would be a great intro if we were doing Oliver Stone's JFK.
This week,
yeah. Never mind what we said last week.
Yeah, we make our own rules.
All right, do you want to let the people know what we're talking about this week?
We are not talking about Oliver Stone's JFK.
No.
This week was my pick, and it was actually another surprise for Jeremy, just because I thought, you know what? I think it'd be fun to follow Shutter Island with this. This week, we are discussing the drama biopic, The Social Network. Like I mentioned last week, it took me a while to get it.
Mm-hmm.
When I first saw the movie. Not because I didn't understand it. There were certain aspects I didn't understand, like especially like the business side of things. It was more just like kind of how the story was being told. I was like, wait, what's happening?
Yeah.
And then it also, I realized rewatching this last night, I'm like 90% certain this was the first David Fincher film I'd ever seen.
Really?
Yeah. Because I don't think by the time this movie came out, I don't think I'd seen Zodiac. I know for sure I hadn't seen Fight Club. I'm pretty sure this was the first David Fincher film I'd ever seen.
Oh, nice.
I know for sure it was the first movie I saw Andrew Garfield in, though.
Maybe me too. I don't know. I don't really know his
Well, because I
his
think after this
filmography.
is when he landed Spider-Man.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, maybe it probably was the first time I saw Andrew Garfield. I think I recognized Jesse Eisenberg. I had for sure
Yeah,
seen a
Zombieland.
yeah, and I'd for sure seen a David Fincher film. I saw Zodiac in theaters. I was obsessed with this. We talked about that in the it didn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this movie I was so excited about. But not at first. I think the first time someone had mentioned it to me, I was like, a movie about Facebook? I was like, that just happened. Like, what are you talking about? A movie about Facebook?
Yeah.
You know, like this is new. This isn't history quite yet, is it? And so I was kind of like a Facebook movie that's super bizarre and that seems weird, and I don't want to see it. I saw the trailer for it, thought, okay, that's a little bit more interesting. And then it started winning a bunch of awards. I was like, is it really that good? And then I rented it and I go, oh, it is good. So
Oh, I understand now.
yeah, rented it from the library.
Big, hang on. I think that's the biggest slap in the face. You walk into a library and they're like, "Oh, like, are you looking for a certain book?" No, I'm looking for a movie. And you're like,
I can guarantee you, not a single library staff has ever seen me in a book section of the library.
"Oh, so they're probably like, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah,
He knows where he's going."
yeah. I went to the books on tape and DVDs. That's where I would go. It was perfect because it was right when you walked in. You just turn to the right and you're there.
I don't remember how I saw this movie. I just distinctly remember buying it.
Okay.
I remember being at Best Buy and I saw it. And I was like, "Oh yeah, this movie. Why not?" And then I bought it and watched it constantly because even though I didn't understand it, I loved the cinematography. And this is, of course, early stages of me learning about cinematography and about pacing. And of course, now that I'm older and have seen this movie so many times, I even leaned over to Ashley, who she wasn't really paying attention, but you know, I just appreciated really now, especially all the blocking that went into with Armie Hammer.
Yeah.
Because I remember the first time I saw this movie, I thought he was twins.
Really?
Because that's just how good it is, man. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's Fincher, so you know the CGI is gonna be really good.
Yeah.
And okay, I guess we should start off by saying Armie Hammer, scandal noted, and that's it. We're gonna move on.
I'm not
gonna keep bringing it up.
retroactively. Do you want to retroactively discredit yourself from Call Me by Your Name?
No. Okay. So
well, I guess we should do our jobs. So the social network, everyone. It, again, in the intro, it's a biopic of the essentially rise of Facebook, of how Mark Zuckerberg kind of came up with the idea. The movie is told brilliantly in flashbacks from two different depositions that Mark was actually involved in, two lawsuits against the Winklevoss twins and his former business partner, Eduardo Saverin. I almost forgot Eduardo's name. But the movie is told through flashbacks in chronological order. I do really like that Fincher still keeps us going in chronological order. You know, it's not flashbacks all over the place. So we see Mark, the early stages of what starts as the idea, which then becomes the full version of Facebook, which then leads to it exploding. And really, interesting enough that we're choosing this movie now in 2024 when Facebook is still dominating everything right now.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's dominant. I mean, it's not as popular as it once was.
That's true, but with Zuckerberg buying Instagram and WhatsApp, he's expanded the Facebook, the Meta family, so he can keep Facebook in the know.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, but anyway, and so the film is just played out through the highs and the lows of what Mark went through, and really kind of leading to his own sort of bittersweet ending. As soon as I finished the movie, I watched a analysis of the script, and they referred to the ending as a bittersweet ending.
We watched the same video. I also watched that one
from Studio Binder.
Yeah,
perfect. That's actually where I write my scripts, by the way. Studio Binder is an awesome website. When I actually get around to writing scripts. But yeah, that's The Social Network. I didn't want to really get in too much into detail because I figured that's what we're going to do. But because, and I guess we can start with the structure of the film. The structure lends itself so perfectly.
The structure of this film is everything. The structure of this film, taking place in flashback during these depositions, is brilliant because not only are we getting the story from different perspectives, but we're also getting, from just a technical standpoint, we're getting exposition that we need that doesn't feel forced. We're getting to know everyone's relation to one another. We're getting to know everyone's feelings very precisely. And again, it's done brilliantly with this structure. I love with all my heart the opening scene.
Yeah.
With Rooney Mara, who's amazing, and Jesse Eisenberg. So that, I mean, it's brilliant because it tells you everything you need to know about Mark Zuckerberg, true or not. I kind of don't even want to get into what's said to be real and what's said not to be. It doesn't matter to me, not in this context.
Yeah, I would say so.
Because I'm not looking for this movie really for historical accuracy necessarily. It's really just a portrait of personalities, and it's really just putting these characters to light and showing who they are and what their motivations are. I am sure in some cases pretty, in pretty broad strokes, but Sorkin, which, I mean, we've sung his praises before. Aaron Sorkin is probably my favorite screenwriter. Anything he's ever written, I love. Even if it's not as good as this is probably, I think, his best script. Excluding like his television shows and the West Wing. Jesus. So to put it, I'm sure I mentioned this in our Steve Jobs episode. Maybe, I don't know. Only like 2 people listen to that. So, but what's astounding, and I should have brought it with me. I have in my West Wing box set, I have a copy of the pilot script that it comes with. Every like interruption, every hiccup, every word stumble, every hem, every haw is written down. So when they're stumbling over their words, this isn't an acting choice. It's written down. When they're talking over each other and interrupting each other, that's all written down precisely. These people are not making acting choices, that are separate from the script. They're not improvising. This is all meticulously written down, which is astounding to me. That's how Sorkin writes. And he said in interviews before, and I completely agree with this, that when he was a kid, his parents would take him to plays all the time. They would go see theatrical productions. And he said that even though he was so young and he didn't really understand what was going on, he loved listening to the dialogue like it was music. He liked the rhythm of it, and he liked he loved people talking, and so that's what he emulates in his scripts. And of course he does. I mean, you can tell right away. He's one of the few screenwriters that has a style. That as soon as people start speaking in his films, you know exactly that it's Sorkin. And so what he does brilliantly is he uses misunderstandings to give exposition. An example would be when he meets Rashida Jones for the first time. He asks who she is. She gives her name and what she does. Or she gives her name. And he's no, what do you do? Right? It's a misunderstanding. Yet we know her name. And we know what she does. And we know why she's there. And it doesn't seem forced at all. It just seems like that's not what I meant. And the script is full of this. The entire opening sequence is misunderstanding, overlapping dialogue, another misunderstanding, interrupting each other, talking about two separate things at the same time, getting back on the same page, getting off again for, I think, 5 minutes?
5 or 6.
It's brilliant. I could listen to an Aaron Sorkin film without any sort of visuals and still enjoy it, I feel like.
Yeah. And if we didn't talk about it enough with Steve Jobs, Sorkin just he knows how to do a biopic really well, And I think it's what we said about not really focusing on what's true and what's not. And I think that's the same goes for Sorkin. Is I'm not gonna say what's true and what's not. I'm just gonna write these characters, not necessarily how he perceives them, but how they come across. Like I'm not going to go into too much about it, because if you want to listen to me talk about Steve Jobs, go listen to our Steve Jobs episode. But that's how most people saw Steve Jobs, is what we see in the movie. This very abrasive, sure of himself, I'm better than everyone because I know I'm better than everyone kind of mentality. And he does the same thing. And again, he does the same thing in the opening sequence. We know Mark Zuckerberg is intelligent. We know he's insecure. And we know he's angry. And it's just brilliant that we know all these things like that
in 5 minutes. And we know that we know what he wants. He wants to stand out. He wants to fit in. But I mean, stand out as in he wants to prove himself to be an exceptional person, to do something exceptional. And he wants exclusivity. He doesn't want to be just an average person. He wants to be an elite.
And then he made an app that's for everyone.
And it's almost poetic that he just happens to link up with the Winklevi.
Yeah.
Because they are exactly what he wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's up for debate if he actually did steal everything that they were working towards. I mean, you could argue he did because they settled out of court, but that's whatever.
Settled out of court, $65 million.
Yeah, which of course is nothing compared
Christ.
to their worth, right? So what I also love about this opening is we're not to the depositions yet. We're not to the flashbacks yet. We're not to any of this back and forth yet, because we're getting his retaliation to Erica breaking up with him. And this is, I mean, I have a lot of favorite scenes. This is one of my favorites because we're mixing the editing style, which is this cross-cutting between the Final Club party and Zuckerberg making this horribly sexist, misogynistic website.
Yeah.
And with Trent Reznor's music, it's the perfect combination. So, and again, the fast dialogue, and it's sharp and it's intelligent and it's precise. That's, I think, what I love most about Sorkin is interested in people who know what they're talking about, talking about what they know. And it's amazing to watch. Yeah, that's
I read I read that both Andrew Garfield and Jesse Eisenberg picked up like for dummies books. So like for Andrew, it was like economics for dummies, and Jesse picked up C++, which is coding. And apparently they read like the first chapter and then didn't touch it again. And they're like, okay, we understand this. We get this now.
Yeah, one of the things about Sorkin that I don't believe that he says is he doesn't know really anything about what he writes about. He says he knows really nothing about politics, yet he wrote an entire show, well,
about politics,
half a show, that is probably one of the best representations of the best version of what the White House is.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you not know? You know? He's probably he thinks he's one of these people that he learns it, he writes it, he forgets it thing, I think. But to me, it's like you can't just say that you don't know, because the amount of detail that goes into these stories, I mean, forget it. I don't believe it.
I mean, maybe that's it. You know, maybe he wants his characters to know how to talk like this and understand what they're saying. And then so he's like, okay, I'm going to learn it so I can put it on the page. Okay, it's on the page. I don't need to know it anymore.
I guess. I mean, it's got to be what he does. I don't know.
I mean, you got to think. I mean, with all the knockouts that he's had, I mean, I'm sure he's got to keep that brain,
I guess,
purged.
Clean.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay, but anyway, the cross cutting between the face smash and the Final Club, because it's what Zuckerberg wants more than anything at this point in time, to be a part of the elite and part of the Final Club. Yet the way he's trying to reconcile his insecurity and his anger, he's, oh, I'm so sorry, my cats are being so fucking stupid. They just knocked my cord out of the Jesus, sorry about that, guys. He's bottling up all of his anger and his resentment and his insecurity, and he's throwing it into what he's good at, which is coding and creating websites. And I love that. And I don't know if any of this is true. I didn't look up to see, because it's not important to me. But I like to think that he.
I did look up a few things because I was curious. I don't know if this website ever existed, but Facebook was sort of created after a breakup. Like he had the idea after a breakup.
I see.
So it's kind of true.
True or not, I think it's very effective, because again, we get to see not only more sides of, or more detailed sides of Zuckerberg, but we get to see his intelligence and his drive in the scene as well.
And you know, and I made this observation watching it last night, and it's something that we already knew about Mark Zuckerberg, but the film is showing us this 14 years before. He's also an arrogant prick too.
Yeah.
Now granted, we already know this in 2024. We know he's an arrogant prick.
Yeah.
You know, he thinks he is, you know, a god among men because he invented Facebook. But, you know, 14 years ago, you know, people just kind of saw him as kind of the nerdy guy who made poking. As where Aaron Sorkin and even Fincher is like, no, he's an arrogant asshole. And I love that we see that again during all of this and the lead up to him meeting the Winklevoss twins. Like one of my favorite interactions when he meets the Winklevi is, you know, they're like, oh yeah, and you also made something in high school, right? And he's like, yeah, you know, I made a music MP3 player that, you know, goes based on your music taste. And they're like, oh, did anyone try to buy it? And he's like, yeah, you know, Microsoft was interested. And they're like, oh, how much did that sell for? He's like, oh, I didn't. I put it on the internet for free. And they're like, why? And he just like shrugs.
That's something you know, I think is true, is that he really doesn't really give a shit about the money.
Maybe not then.
Yeah,
he
maybe
definitely
not
cares about the money. He definitely cares about the money now.
But yeah, I don't think he did really give a shit about the money.
I agree. But to me, that was like, that just shows how arrogant he is. It's like, I didn't need to make money. I just put it out there because why not?
He liked that Microsoft was interested.
Yeah.
That's all he needed. He just needed someone to be interested in basically telling him that he did a good job on something and that he's good at something. Which again is why he's so insecure about Eduardo getting punched by the Phoenix. Because they're telling Eduardo he's worthy of this thing.
Yeah.
And he's not, no one's telling him that. And so that's why he has this drive, and that's why when anyone tells him he has a good idea, he sets them above, like, let's say Eduardo, for instance. He's constantly doing that.
Yeah. You know what? And this is good. This is a good transition to Eduardo, because Eduardo and Mark are definitely highly intelligent in their own rights. You know, Eduardo may not know a lot about coding, but he knows a lot about programs, clearly. Because I mean, he's the one who came up with the algorithm for what was it, Face Smash or whatever? Yeah. And so they're both very intelligent in their own ways. But it's almost like the moment we see Eduardo telling him, I got punched by the Phoenix, it almost sets the sort of like chain motion of Mark constantly underappreciating Eduardo. And like you said, him putting other people's opinions or values above Eduardo. Even though Eduardo is sort of the voice of reason here.
Yeah.
You know, like with the cease and desist letter. You know, and Eduardo's immediately like, dude, like, are we doing anything wrong here? Because like, if we're doing something wrong, you need to tell me. Like, I can probably help us, but like, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, Mark's like, I didn't tell you because it's not that big of a deal. It's all good. And you know, and Eduardo is constantly the voice of reason in Mark's life, but I think because Mark is jealous, one, and insecure, two, he just chooses to ignore Eduardo and ignore the advice.
Yeah, definitely. Eduardo is the voice of reason, and he's just trying to keep Mark level-headed and realistic. I mean, as soon as they meet Sean Parker, it's, you know, Which I think during, like, I've looked it up before. I didn't this time, and I should have, obviously, because, the last time I looked it up, I wasn't talking about it on the internet. Yet, here we are. His name isn't Sean Park. He has a different last name, I think. The guy who invented Napster, is my
No,
understanding.
it's Sean Parker.
Are you sure?
Yeah, dude. Because I was literally looking into it.
Okay, I think once I looked it up, and I thought for some reason he had a different name. I don't know why I thought that. Anyway,
I mean, who knows?
Anyway, when they meet Sean Parker, it's like Eduardo knows immediately that he's bad news.
Mm-hmm.
He's obviously in the middle of thousands and thousands of lawsuits. From, as Sean Parker would say, anyone who's ever went to the Grammys. Which is sort of funny because it's Justin Timberlake saying it.
Yeah. Sidebar, everyone. If our audience out there doesn't know what Napster is, it was essentially music streaming before music streaming. You could listen to any music for free until certain artists, Metallica, were like, hey, wait a minute. Our music shouldn't be free. People should be paying for it.
Yeah.
And Sean Parker was sued constantly, and Napster eventually shut down.
Yeah.
History lesson on Napster.
Also, shout out to Dakota Johnson, I guess. She's in this movie for 2 minutes.
I remember stumbling upon this. I think it was a Variety interview with Andrew Garfield and Dakota Johnson. And like, they weren't in something recently. They just, I guess, got them together to do like a, not their actors on actors series, just like they just got them together to do something. And someone was like, oh yeah, you two were in The Social Network. And they're like, oh my God, that's right, we were. Because they're not in any scenes together, and Dakota Johnson's there, and then she's gone.
Yeah, she's in it for like 2 minutes. Yeah.
2 minutes too many, in my opinion.
That's hilarious. Sean Parker is... I don't like Sean Parker. I don't know if he's actually like this.
So this is a little bit of research I did because I was curious. I was like, if we know as audience members this guy's no good almost immediately, how did Mark not see this then? Supposedly, according to things I could find, Sean's not really like this. Apparently, he's actually very nice, completely different. Like, he openly criticized Timberlake's performance of him, saying that, like, he plays me as morally reprehensible, but then added, but what can I do? I'm being portrayed by a sex symbol. But I think it's because, in context of the movie, I think we needed a villain. And
sure,
especially with how this movie is structured with these depositions, in Eduardo's eyes, the villain is Sean Parker.
Yeah, well, we have the angel on his shoulder, which is Eduardo. We have to have a devil on the other shoulder, I suppose, which is Sean Parker. And you're right. With the structure of the film, we need a antagonistic figure to corrupt Zuckerberg. And so that makes perfect sense to me. And I guess that brings us to an interesting topic. I guess if we could have a little aside in terms of adapting, like, not just a book, that's based on the Accidental Billionaires, but adapting real people is really interesting because you need to. This is a great example of having to change or alter someone's personality to fit a narrative, to fit a structure or framing device, to fit a plot, which is really interesting because, of course, if you were Sean Parker, you would be upset too because he looks like an arrogant, playboy asshole.
Yeah.
But for the movie to work, we need him to be like that. Just like I don't know if Mark Zuckerberg is really that snarky. Who knows? But he needs to be sort of that snarky for the movie to work.
I was curious how he felt about the movie, and he claimed that he would never go see the movie until he finally did. And apparently all he could say was, like, aside from the many inaccuracies, of course, is his opinion, they got his clothes right.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
But no, I agree. And, it kind of reminds me of when we did Raging Bull.
Mm-hmm.
That's another biopic that we did. And, a real person being adapted on film. And I remember, and this always stuck with me when you said this, that when the real Jake and his real ex-wife went and saw the film, that he went up to her and said, "Was I really like that?" And she said, "No, you were worse."
Yeah.
Which tells me that De Niro or Scorsese was like, we might need to just soften
dial
him
it back a bit,
like just a little bit,
Sure.
I mean, yeah, we're gonna film that scene where he beats her, but like just a little bit,
Yeah.
But I agree, because from everything I read about the real Sean Parker, apparently he's nothing like Justin's version, but you're right. In context of the movie, he needs to be this asshole. He needs to be this outside force pushing against Eduardo and corrupting Mark. Yeah.
One of my favorite tropes, I guess it wouldn't be a trope, it's just, narrative device, is a story within a story. So I really liked when Sean Parker took Zuckerberg to that club, and the music's blaring and there's lights flashing everywhere, and he's telling him this tragic story of what it's like to sort of stop before you're ahead, which is the person who created Victoria's Secret. It's a true story. He did kill himself. He jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. And now, whether or not that's why he did it, I don't know. But that story is very effective because it's another business story. It's a tragedy. It's true. And he and again, Sorkin is so good at this sort of stuff that it's almost one of those misunderstandings where Zuckerberg's like, "Why are you even telling me this?" He goes, "You said my date looked familiar. She's a Victoria's Secret model." And he's answering his question by telling him this story, basically telling him to go with him because he's going to take him over the edge. He's going to take him to the stratosphere. Sean Parker is going to elevate Facebook, beyond the stars, where Eduardo wants him to stay on Earth. And here's what happens when you stay on Earth. Here's what happens when you sell before you succeed.
Yeah, and I love that we kind of get a little bit of that before, because we kind of get the same thing twice when they're all together at that group dinner. And then this scene when it's just Mark and Sean, at the group dinner, Eduardo's like, settle a bet for us. I think it's time to monetize the site. Mark doesn't think so. Who's right? And he does say neither one of you yet, but he's only paying attention to Eduardo, pretty much saying like, you're wrong. I see value in this. You don't see value. And then when he's got Mark on his own, he's able to kind of dig the hooks in a little bit more and really show him, I've got you. Eduardo doesn't got you.
Yeah.
But I think it's because he wants to be a part of, well, of course we know this as the audience. Sean just wants to be a part of this because he wants money.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think he really gives a shit about Mark or maybe he does, but he only wants to be a part of this for the money.
Yeah, he wants to
aspect
be
of it.
successful. He wants to be part of the elite, just like Zuckerberg does. But Zuckerberg, I think, just wants someone to say that he's done something great, whereas Sean Parker just wants to, be a part of the party. Like he just,
Well, yeah, and they're essentially feeding each other's own demons,
Mhm.
whether consciously or subconsciously. Sean keeps telling Mark, like, oh yeah, these are fantastic ideas, great ideas, which is stoking Mark's ego. And then Mark is including Parker or Sean more in making business decisions and, including him in the party. And Eduardo's the only one kind of like, hey, wait a minute. Like, can we just take like 2 steps back before we take 10 steps forward?
Now, I do. All right, let's take a break from Sean Parker, or maybe forever.
Okay.
He's so nasty in this, man. He's icky, but a few guys who are kind of icky in their own way, but also they're kind of victims, are the Winklevi and Devi. They are, of course, what Zuckerberg aspires to be. He is like when they take him into that exclusive club, but they can't bring him past the bike room. It's sort of, again, it's gatekeeping, it's exclusivity, it's being so close yet so far, for Zuckerberg. And then, of course, he gets the invitation to be a part of this elite in a way. But then he decides he's just going to do it himself, and he'll make his own elite in a way, I guess. But the Winklevi are, I guess we should probably say just Winklevoss twins. I don't know what the correct pronunciation or what the correct tense is, but
the Winklevosses,
the Winklevosses, the Winklevi. They're interesting because I don't like them, but I also kind of feel bad for them because they, or at least one of them, God knows what's
Cameron.
Yeah, is he in the nice one?
Yeah, the one who's like, we're gentlemen of Harvard.
Oh yeah, that nerd. By the way, when Devi is talking about who all joined the site when it first began, he said the number of students. He said 2 future Olympic athletes and a movie star. The movie star is Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman
I
went
looked
to
that up.
Harvard, during that time, and she was, there.
Yeah.
So, again, I feel bad for the Winklevi and Debbie, but then again, I don't like them either because they are sort of these elitist. They're jerks. When the president of Harvard told them to stop using their privilege.
Well, I mean, in his defense, they kind of did. When he asks them, he asks his secretary, how did we get this meeting? Friends of their fathers, and he's like, oh, so you're over here bitching to me about your little fifis being hurt, but you used your daddy to get this meeting. Like, okay.
I'm sorry, it's Divya, by the way, not Devi. I'm sorry.
Well, I think they call him Debbie, as like a nickname, but no, I agree with what you're saying because they're just like before. No one in this movie, except Eduardo, are good people. Well, except for the lawyers, because they're just doing their job.
Yeah.
But no one besides Eduardo, no one is a good person in this movie. But I think narratively, we do need to feel a little bit bad for the Winklevosses, because we should. Because what we're being presented as in the movie is, Mark stole their entire idea. Sure, he may have not used their code, which, okay, but you stole the concept, you stole the idea, So we should feel bad for him, but my sympathy stops where their privilege starts.
Yeah.
Because, once they start using their privilege to get things, because I'm pretty sure their lawyers are their dad's lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I
but,
thought was
I do feel bad for them.
I thought it was a really interesting choice to not show them as this sort of these pathetic victims that were wronged and, that they deserve all of our sympathy. Like I really appreciated that we were shown them as these three-dimensional, yes, they were wronged in a way. But yet they also have their faults also. And God, man, they were close to winning that race. I'll give them that. They were really close. But I forgot.
What is
I don't
that?
think they medaled, but they did go to the Olympics. I forgot which one.
It says in the blurbs at the end of the movie that they placed 6th at the Olympics.
I mean,
I think
that's
Beijing.
pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I think they went back. I want to say the first time I saw this movie and I read that, I was like, did they ever go back? I think they went back and they ranked even lower.
Oh, yikes. Well, what are you going to do?
So, what are you going to do? But yeah, it is interesting that Sorkin and Fincher make the audience feel sympathy for them, but again, it makes sense. Because they're not presenting Mark as this evil guy, especially in the end, when he even tells Rashida Jones, I'm not a bad person. And she's like, I know you're not a bad person. He's just made bad decisions because he wants to be the one to get ahead, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, he wants to succeed. That's all he wants. He wants to be known as someone who did something great. That's all this is. He wants he wants to be in that final club.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, oh boy, man, I know we're jumping around quite a bit. I don't care. When he runs back into Erica.
Oh. After getting some bathroom stall dome.
Yeah.
Which, can I say, that's, in my opinion, one of my 2 favorite funny scenes in the whole movie, with them standing outside just being like did that really just happen? Like, the second funniest in my opinion is when he's throwing the beer at Sean and his date, and she keeps not catching the beer, and he's like, oh, no worries, I'll throw you another one. And then he throws another one and is like but yeah, when he runs back into Erica at that bar, it's so brutal that she doesn't let him off easy, which, I mean, he doesn't deserve to be let off easy.
No, because we're about halfway through the movie at this point. He still doesn't get it.
Yeah.
He still feels as if he wasn't completely at fault for what he did. And he thinks that now that he's doing something great, that he is, finding some success in what he's doing, that all is forgiven, or that, look, it did work out. Look, I'm doing this thing. And that's not the point. The point is you're trying to do something great, or trying to do something memorable, or whatever, but you're also donning the personality of an asshole.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up this again, man, because I had this realization rewatching this for the first time in a while. Mark, the movie doesn't, I mean, yes, the movie paints Mark as an arrogant prick and an asshole. But especially in the final 10 minutes with Rashida Jones, where she tells him, like, yeah, I don't think you're an asshole. You're just trying too hard to be one. There is this difference between Mark and Sean. When Sean's got him alone in that club, and Sean tells him that story, I created Napster when I was 19 because I got my the love of my life was dating some jock and I wanted to prove something. Mark asks her, do you still think about her? And he's like, who? And he's like, that girl from high school. And he's like, no. Clearly fame and money have gotten to Sean to where he doesn't think about her. But especially towards the end of the movie, Mark, I think that's the difference, is Mark still thinks about Erica.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's not necessarily like a longing to get back with her. I think it's because she was the first one to really put him in his place.
Yeah. Well,
and I think
in the movie, anyway.
Yeah. And I think it was this sense of, I just want to show you what I've done.
Yeah.
Like that, maybe that in his own ways, maybe not necessarily apologize, but just be like, look, I was wrong. Like, and that's why he keeps refreshing after he sends her a friend request.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But I think the movie does a good job of showing us that, yeah, Mark likes all these things that Sean is promising, but he's not like Sean.
No.
Which is my point.
He's not as jaded or as narcissistic as Sean is.
Well, especially when we get to my personal favorite scene, and I'm sure everyone's favorite scene, of the reveal that Sean, of course, Mark's getting blamed for it, but I'm pretty sure it was more Sean than it was Mark, cut Eduardo out of Facebook. That whole sequence is one of my favorite.
Of course.
I mean, again, I'm sure it's everyone's favorite of Eduardo just laying in to Mark. And I love that Eduardo scares Sean to flinch, and then Mark says, you didn't have to be that rough on him. And I think, which makes me think that it was more Sean than Mark. I mean, Mark definitely had.
Well, Mark had to pull the trigger, of course, but it's Sean's influence, of course.
Yeah.
Because people keep coming into the business, but instead of diluting everyone's shares, they just diluted Eduardo's.
Yeah. So, okay, I just want to touch on this real quick, or maybe we can talk about this for a second. So even though I didn't understand a lot of diluting shares back when I first saw this movie, I knew that it was bad. That Eduardo's shares went from 34% to 0.03%.
Yeah.
Which in actuality, I did look it up. It was actually diluted down to about 10%, but that's still a 20% decrease.
Yeah.
Like that was still, he still got fucked.
Yeah.
I think for the movie, it had to be a drastic amount.
Of course.
So we could really see Eduardo's getting cut out of this.
Yeah. The emotional impact needs to be there, and so the number needs to be a little lower.
Yeah. But I knew, I was like, that's not good, man. And it's, in my opinion, it's one of the most heartbreaking scenes to really see how Sean has got his hooks into Mark, that he's essentially causing this rift between these two best friends, just because Sean wants a little bit more money.
Yeah. Yeah, that shot of the camera, which is pointed down, just goes up and then looks up at Eduardo as he walks towards Mark while he's on the computer. I love that shot so much because what it does is, and it's so fast, but the shot starts on a rug that is the Facebook logo, which immediately tells you how successful they're being and how far they've come and how much they've left Eduardo out of it. Because I think at that point, we're sort of seeing the business through Eduardo's perspective in that scene, because we're like, oh, I didn't realize they had expanded so much and that they've grown this much and they're this successful. for to me, the rug symbolizes that because it's like
Yeah.
established. We are making it, and it's all without a guard.
We're big enough for a branded rug.
Yeah, I mean
And
that's a big deal. At
yeah,
least as far as visual language goes.
yeah. Yeah, can I tell you, this is actually what kind of inspired me to put this as a secret surprise for you.
Mhm.
Was I saw some behind the scenes footage of all the broken laptops
Yeah,
that they used.
it's a lot.
Because again, I don't know if we talked about it in Fight Club. I don't think we talked about it in The Killer.
We definitely did in Zodiac.
Fincher's a perfectionist,
Yeah.
and will redo shots as many times as he sees fit, especially now shooting on digital.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was like 10 laptops,
Which is
that
low compared to what it could have been.
Yeah, I think it was like 10 or 11 laptops that Andrew Garfield had to destroy.
Yeah.
For this shot.
Yeah, I mean, even in Zodiac, the amount of times, I think it was 70 something times that Gyllenhaal had to throw his sketchbook in the passenger seat.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like 70 something times that he had him do it, at least.
Well, I mean, we've sung Fincher's praises enough, but I mean, this is what makes him so good.
I agree. And this is sort of an unusual story for him. To come on and do this. And I think with his influence, it is, I think with anybody else, this movie, it would be just so different. There's behind the scenes of Fincher going line by line with Sorkin, with the actors as they're, reading the lines. I think sort of a one-on-one situation. It wasn't a table read necessarily, and he was like, Fincher's like, I think that it should be this line, let's cut this line because you don't need to say it that many times. It's already been established here. And I think the way it would flow, it should go this way. And Sorkin is like, oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. And so, it's being respectful, yet collaborative, yet with constructive criticism of the material, where Fincher is so good at that. I think other directors wouldn't do that. Or they would go a little too far and too disrespectful, and then it would ruin the whole thing. I think Fincher's a great collaborator because he really doesn't write scripts, really. Fincher, I wouldn't say he's a director for hire, but almost.
Well, and I think, I forgot we also did Mank. Well, and I think that maybe comes from just a little, hang on everyone, we'll get back to Social Network, just a little history on Fincher. I think that comes from Alien 3.
Yeah.
That script had been rewritten so many times, and essentially Fox said, come in and shoot it. Don't do anything, just shoot the fucking thing. And he was like, okay, I guess. Yeah. And so I'm pretty sure coming off of a movie like that, especially a movie that was meant to follow James Cameron's Aliens.
And I haven't seen it, and I'm terrified to see it because I know how bad it is, and I don't want to see it because I'm sure it looks
everything. Everything I've read says it's no fault of Fincher's. It has everything to do with the rushed production, the multiple scripts, everything.
Like doing stuff on the day, like doing random, doing script changes and all that on the day. Nah, he needs structure and he needs precision.
Well, and again, back to what you said. I don't think lesser of any other directors. If someone else did this, like if say,
sure,
we'll just use another Sorkin biopic. If Danny Boyle directed this, I don't think the movie would have been bad in any way. I just think Fincher has such a unique vision. It translates well with this type of story.
I agree.
And and it just, I want him and Sorkin to collaborate more. Like I think they worked so well together on this. Sorkin's writing with Fincher's direction. And again, tying it back to the movie now, especially with this shot of Eduardo, all these frustrations that he's had towards Sean and with Mark finally bubbling over to the surface. I think it all culminates perfectly with how Fincher's directing the cast and how the casts are using Sorkin's words. I think this is where it's peak for me.
There's something about the way Fincher also just works with Sorkin's writing, because Sorkin's writing is so unique and it is so difficult. The behind the scenes or the actors just being like, shit, this is hard. Because I mean, basically each scene, each actor is like a page and a half, each of dialogue. So what I liked about Fincher is where on the West Wing, you have a lot of walking and talking, which he'll become famous for, or infamous for, depending on how you feel about walking and talking. But
Family Guy would probably say infamous.
It gives a nice flow to the scene, and you have action with the dialogue, so it's not just people sitting in a room, which he also has those scenes as well, but in the West Wing they would use them walking to have something going on besides the talking. Here Fincher uses cuts and uses editing and uses camera placement and blocking to manipulate action with the dialogue. I think the scene where Zuckerberg is looking out the window and it's raining.
Dude,
I know, it's so good.
That's another one of my favorite scenes. Yeah.
By the way, Sorkin also likes to reuse dialogue, and that ping pong line he's used before. I think either in Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, or he's used it on the West Wing. I don't remember.
Like when you say ping pong, like
when he says that I have enough money to buy, whatever, and turn it into
the Phoenix Club
and turn it into my ping pong.
Yeah,
he's used that before. But anyway, it was Studio 60. It doesn't matter. But in that scene, there are several cuts and several camera placements, and it's very dynamic and it's very exciting to watch. And yet, it's just people sitting in a room. And I think with Fincher, he's finding a way to elevate the dialogue in a more cinematic fashion than I guess it would be presented on the page. Because on the page, it is very dynamic and it is very exciting. But in terms of sitting in the theater and watching it, I think you need this sort of directorial style if you're not having people walk and talk. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, because there is definitely a lot of sitting and talking, and I mean and walking, but yeah.
But you'd never be able to tell. I mean, if I told you that half the movie is sitting and talking, I mean, would you believe me?
No.
Right. Exactly.
No. Now, something I forgot to mention just real quick. With Mark's arrogance, I love anytime the lawyers ask him a question or do something that he would deem as basic. He is very snarky about it. Like when he mentions Eduardo being his best friend, and the Winklevi's lawyers like, your best friend is suing you for something $1 million. Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Or and then, I think a more bitchy one is like, so with your $1,000 contribution and your $5,000 contribution, that's $6,000.
Or your 18,
or whatever.
No, your $18,000 that you had spent $19,000. Hang on, just need to check that. Yep, that's what I got to.
It's a little bitchy.
Well, apparently Fincher says that's his favorite line.
Yeah.
in the whole movie.
Good.
But yeah, so it's really interesting how this movie ramps up. So we ramp up to this again, one of my favorite scenes, and then the movie sort of eases us back down because the last little bit of the movie is Mark finally coming to his senses about Sean. Sean
and Sean being arrested also doesn't help.
Yeah. Sean being arrested at a co-ed party with probably some potentially minors with cocaine on his possession. And I think Mark really finally sees how paranoid Sean really is, and I think this puts a bad taste in his mouth with Sean, finally confirming, like, I should have been listening to Eduardo all along. And then we go back to the office with Mark's lawyers and Rashida Jones, where I think we kind of get to the core of who Mark is, because she mentions that, they're going to come back and they're going to come with a settlement agreement. And Mark's like, settle? Like, I didn't do anything wrong. Why should we settle? And she pretty much tells him, like, if this goes to court, you will lose. Plain and simple. So it's better that we settle here. You pay a little bit more and move on.
Yeah. This scene also, again, it's the very end. It does, so that video that we both coincidentally watched, I watched it today. They refer to the ending as a bittersweet ending, which I do like. I like this idea of it being bittersweet because he did achieve his goal. Mm-hmm. Yet he's still unfulfilled. And what did it take to get there? It is sort of the bitterness of it, because he looked up Erica, and she has a Facebook, which I think is really interesting. That she has one. You would think she wouldn't. And I think that sort of gives him a glimmer of hope. And then him sending that friend request begrudgingly because he knows that she'll never respond to it. I think deep down he knows that. Yet there's that hope that she might. And he's desperate to make amends because he finally, I think, gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And that those shots of him just constantly refreshing to see if she responded. It's sort of heartbreaking, and it's and of course the musical choice, which I know they paid a fortune for, was "Baby You a Rich Man" by the Beatles. It's off Yellow Submarine, doesn't matter. But the lyrics are so poignant, and they make a lot of sense. I'm going to read some of it to you if you don't mind.
That's fine. Read it like John or
I can't do that. Can't do their voices. It's anyway. It's
if Justin Long can do it, you can do it.
You're absolutely right. So how does it feel to be one of the beautiful people? Now that you know who you are, what do you want to be, and have you traveled very far? As far as the eye can see. It's sort of, again, it's, you made it. What did it take? Did you find the core of who you are? Did you sacrifice a bit of who you are to get there? Or, I thought it was a perfect song choice. Again, it must have cost a fortune.
Or who knows, or Paul was probably like...
Well, that's a good point, because at this time, this is 2010. I think Michael Jackson had passed already, so I think McCartney had the rights to it. So maybe it wasn't as expensive, but that's a fun fact, by the way. Those of you who don't know, Michael Jackson owned the rights to every Beatles song until the day he died.
And coldly told Paul McCartney, "It's just business, Paul."
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah. It kind of ties into the episode.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and I think this is where the tagline of the movie really comes into play, which is, you don't get to 500 million friends without making a few enemies. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so true in context of the story. Now, again, I'm sure Mark has probably burned a lot of bridges in real life.
I'm sure.
But in context of the story, you know, you're right. He's achieved everything that he's ever wanted. You know, he's part of the elite now. You know, especially with the little blurb. He's the youngest billionaire. You know, he's got this exclusivity, even though Facebook's an open app and everyone could be on it. Which, sidebar, hang on, I meant to bring this up. Dakota Johnson's character saying that it's freakishly addictive. I'm like, girlfriend, you don't even know. There's some people that shouldn't even be on Facebook anymore.
Us included, I assume.
But
here we are.
I was making a point. I don't remember the point I was making, but I guess it just, it's very poignant and it's very bittersweet. I remember the point now because he said he accomplished everything he wanted to set out, but you're right, he's still unfulfilled. But I think you're right. I think he finally gets it with what Erica was telling him at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
So the movie, he has kind of come full circle as a character to this moment. And I like that we don't know if Erica ever accepted the friend request. We don't know.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't want to know if she did or not. I think the movie's perfect the way it is.
I agree.
That it just ends.
It
just ends with him looking at that computer screen. I'm assuming wishing and hoping.
It was
please respond.
I liked the way that they did the sort of the epilogue text. These are real hit or miss for me in these biopics. Some of them are just really bad. The epilogue text. But this one's
where are they now text?
Yeah, you know, some of those are sort of hokey or they're not that great or whatever. But I thought this one was really well done. They're not showing, you know, like Armie Hammer next to the Winklevoss twins or whatever. They're not putting up a picture of Jesse Eisenberg and then a picture of Mark Zuckerberg. I kind of don't like that.
Well, and I think that kind of goes back to Fincher forbidding everyone from meeting their real life counterpart.
Makes sense.
And honestly, the movie's also better for it.
Well, yeah. Imagine if Timberlake had met Sean Parker, he'd feel terrible.
Yeah. I'm sure Timberlake probably does, like being like, ooh.
You know, honestly, these days, like, this is how I see Timberlake anyway. This is how I see his personality, so it's, you know, it's whatever.
You know, I mean, we're not at the wrap up yet, but I guess in Oops, I Forgot, Justin plays a really good bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, he's done other movies where he's the bad guy, or at least not a good person. And I'm like, you know, he plays a good bad guy. And I wonder if that comes from being a Mouseketeer and always having to...
They teach you that.
Always having to be...
yeah, in the Mickey Mouse Club, they teach you that.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, one of the epilogue blurbs I really liked is we don't know how much he settled with Eduardo. We just know that he settled.
I bet it's an incredible amount of money.
Well, and speaking of Eduardo, I was kind of curious. I knew he wasn't really involved in Meta now, but I was like, you know, is he involved in some way, or you know? Apparently, Homeboy had a dual citizenship with Singapore and the United States, and he renounced his U.S. citizenship to live in Singapore.
Interesting.
To potentially not have to pay $700 million in taxes.
Oh, Eduardo, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, well, and I was very disappointed. I was like, man, you know, he's been our North Star, our morally, you know, good person. I wonder what he's up to now. I'm like, never mind.
Yikes. Well, there goes that. But, you know, whatever. Yeah, man.
Well, Jeremy, are you ready to wrap up?
Yeah, I'm sort of out of stuff. Which, I mean, and I always do this. I'm like, I'm out of stuff. And then, like, in the next few days, I'm like, son of a bitch. Like, we didn't talk
you'll message
about
me and be
this.
like... Yeah, but I think we did touch on everything.
We got some more stuff.
The
I think
yeah
we should take a moment, um, um, a moment of reflection for Trent Reznor and his incredible score. Um,
100%.
it's the only thing I'm excited about for the new Tron movie. Trent Reznor
Look,
is incredible. I this might be controversial in terms of rock star turned movie composer. I think he is miles above. Um,
don't say it.
I think he's miles above Danny Elfman. No offense to Mr. Elfman, he's great, but I think Trent Reznor's scores are better for me.
Well, and I think that's because he brings that Nine Inch Nails sound with him.
Yeah,
In that he's not um that he's not complacent. Like, not saying that Danny Elfman's complacent, but a lot of his scores do sound the same. Granted, his rock music is completely different.
yeah,
Um,
it's so weird.
everyone listen to Big Mess.
Big Mess
He's
is
out
good.
of his fucking mind.
I do like Big Mess because he is so crazy. Yeah, but Trent Reznor brings some. He is sort of restrained a little bit in some of these musical scores or in some of these pieces in the movie, especially the opening number after Ball and a Biscuit. It's his score, and it's great. It's understated, it's restrained, it's beautiful, it's simple, and it's amazing. And it really does bring you into the loneliness that is Mark Zuckerberg in that moment.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that's all I had.
Well, that's great, man. I think hopefully this will be the banger that gets us those views again.
We'll see.
So, buddy, what are we talking about next week?
That's a great question. I had you choose before we got started. And I don't know if I want to go with what you chose or go with something different. Which would be so rude, right? Either way,
Well, I'm going to be honest. I do that to Ashley a lot. I'll be like, 1 or 2. She'll be like, 1. I'm going with 2.
Yeah, 2 is better. Either way, it involves some sort of like, it involves some research with analogy and metaphor and sort of like mythological digging. Both films do. I just don't know which weird I want to go with. Because they're both going to be really strange, and it's probably going to be the last one before Maya's born. So,
oh yeah,
I know we're getting close, guys. So, I want to go out with something super strange and super weird. But I think we might go with something a little more restrained. So Yorgos Lanthimos had a really big year this year.
Oh shit!
With Poor Things and Kinds of Kindness. I have yet to see Kinds of Kindness, so I'm really excited to see that. But for next week, we are going to be discussing Killing of a Sacred Deer. So that should be really exciting.
Man, I know nothing about. I mean, I do know a little bit about the movie. I've read up on it because I've heard it mentioned so many times on so many different lists of like movies to see, horror thrillers, and I'm excited, especially considering Ashley really wants to see this movie. She she started a Letterboxd and she put this on there. I think she only put it on there for Barry Keoghan, which, I mean, look, he's so hot right now.
He is.
I think that's the only reason why. I know how, at least from what I understand, how weird the movie's going to get. I don't think she's going to like that very much, but I mean,
yeah, it gets really strange. Yeah, I think besides The Lobster, which we've done, so go check that out if you guys haven't.
Dude, shout out to the Lobster.
I've never been more proud of a title of an episode in my life than it was for Heartbreak Hotel, and 8 people watched that episode, I think, or less.
I think it was about 8. Yeah. Yeah, I felt we did such a good. I felt like we did such a good job last week too. And,
I know.
17 people have watched it.
I remember when Killing of a Sacred Deer came out, or at least was being talked about, like in the festival circuit, and like it wasn't widely released yet, and people were talking about it. I remember seeing the poster. It wasn't the poster with Kyogen in it.
Upside Down.
Yeah, it wasn't that one. It was with Colin Farrell in the hospital room, but it's a tall poster. Well, at least, it's made to look very tall because of its subject, but he's at the very bottom in the hospital room looking at a hospital bed, and the curtains in the window just stretch all the way to the top of the poster, and it was so cool looking, and it was very foreboding and brings on a sense of dread. And people kept calling it a horror film, and I'm like, I'm not too convinced it's a horror film yet, but when I saw it, I loved it. I didn't get it, but I loved it. It was so very strange and very on brand with Lanthimos at that time, with the monotone dialogue delivery and just the very strange atmosphere. It was very cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm excited. This will be an interesting one to end on, but that's an announcement for another day.
Yeah.
Yeah. But nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, this is the one I picked, or is this the one you're going opposite of?
Just the opposite. I went with the opposite.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, everyone, we hope you enjoyed this episode on The Social Network, and we will see you next week for The Killing of a Sacred Deer.